Iron swirls. We're going to be saving it as a PNG file. And we're just going to call it Iron Swirls. We're going to call it Iron Swirls underscore ID for an ID map. (24-bit) is fine. So we have our texture size. We're using the existing map channel 1. Let's render that out. Don't worry about that. That's just Max saying you haven't told it where you want to put the new map. We don't want it to put it anywhere. So now it's rendering out our ID map, our material ID map. Alright, let's jump into Substance Painter now. Let's create a new project. We can discard that, I've already saved that out. We're working with the Unreal Engine 4 template. We're going to select the original model we exported out. This Iron Swirls FBX. We're working it to 2K 2048. We're going to add the Iron Swirls ID map we just did a render to texture to in Max and go OK. Now, for anyone that's confused as to why we would want to use a material ID map as opposed to just exporting our original model with 5 different textures here in Substance Painter, which you can do. So instead of having one material here, we could have 4 more or 3 more, and we could texture them up that way. The problem with doing it that way is when you go to export your textures, you're going to be exporting 5 different texture sets for one object. And if you're working with games or making a game model, that's not good. What that's going to do in the game engine is one object using 5 different textures is going to create more draw calls, which is going to slow down the game engine and increase memory as well. So for a game model, you really should try and stick to using one texture set, not multiple textures on one object, as much as you can. In some instances you can't get away with it. You have to do that. But if you can avoid doing that, that's the best way to go if you're making game models. If you're doing rendering like we were when we were doing the garden terrace, that's not a problem. We don't have to worry about that. You can have as many multi-materials as you want, as many texture maps on one object as you want. But because you're making a game model, and every texture map adds a draw call to the game engine, to the graphics card, to the computer's memory, what it will end up doing is slowing down the rendering engine, which means your game is going to start not being it's going to slow your game down. And if you're making a game, you want it to run as fast as it possibly can. So if you're making a game model, make sure if you can that you only use one texture for your model, not multiple textures on one model piece. Okay, so that's the reason we're doing a multi-material here, but we don't want multiple textures, we just want one texture. So what I'm going to do here is select the ID map, which is that multi-material we rendered out in Max. We're still only working with one texture though, but what we can do now is I can say now I want to make sure I use the same textures I used on the gate so everything stays consistent. So the first one I want is metallic paint. Now, where is that? This one here. I'm going to drag that into my material editor, into my layer stack here, which is going to assign it to the entire model. I'm just going to remove this bottom layer because I don't need it. Now, by all means, you could throw another material on here and start painting it in with an alpha map by hand, like zooming in and painting in the material by hand that way. But it's going to get very fiddly and very awkward, particularly with geometry like this. And a better way to do it is to use this multi-material ID map, which is what I'm going to show you now. So we want this gold paint to only really affect the that inner square and that circular piece here at the bottom. So what we can do is if we right click and we go add mask with color selection, See, it selects, it knows our ID mask is there. We go pick color. I can pick. What's it done here? Hang on. Pick color. I'm just going to check out my material mask here. Orange, that should be good. So remove that effect. We'll do it again. Add mask with color selection. Pick color. For some reason, well, it looks like the UV map to this piece of geometry is not correct. I'm going to jump back into Max and check that. Now UVs look fine here. What I will do though is I'll collapse my stack, just in case during the export it didn't like the fact that it wasn't collapsed. You really should collapse it down before you do an export to anything really, just to be on the safe side. Exports iron swirls. Let's resave it again. So what I'm going to do too is I'm just going to reset the X form. I've noticed with these models occasionally you can run into problems if you don't reset the X form. Again, we're going to collapse the stack and export the model one more time. Okay, let's jump back into Substance Painter here. I'm going to edit my project configuration. I'm going to reload that FBX file again. Let's remove this effect and try one more time. Add mask with color selection, pick color. It still doesn't look like it's coloring it correctly. I know from looking at it here that the colors that it's using are not correct.
The mountain where I can soar across the sky, and so my feet start to tremble, they lift off the ground, I leave it all behind, and I can see the horizon, it's calling my name.
It looks to me like the UV map is incorrect here. I'm looking at the colors that it's assigned to this model piece. It may have something to do with the alpha map actually. Let me jump back into Max and look at that. That was a problem we were getting with the render to texture as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select our object. I'm just going to assign that material to it. I'm just making sure show shaded and show realistic is turned on. Alright, now I'm going to re-export it one more time. We'll call this one Iron Swirls _ R2 for revision 2. Just so I don't get completely confused here. Okay. Back to Substance. In fact, let's create a new project. Discard this one. Select that Ironwork R2 that we just exported. Again, we're going to add our ID map. Okay, select the ID map, which is this one. Drag metallic paint. Create a mask with a color map. Pick color. Again, it's still doing it. Why? Obviously a problem with the original mesh here, and I've got to try and work out why it's doing that. The UV map is correct. Everything within 0 to 1, so that's all fine. Our pivot is in the middle, so that's all good. The material has no alpha map, so that's all fine.
New eyes, new vision for the world. An unparalleled blending of science and art.
Often it is difficult for a person to control a complicated sound synthesizer quickly enough. A computer can take over much of this control work and do it more quickly and accurately than a human being.
And all this has been just the beginning.
UV maps are fine. I'll jump back into substance here and have a look at this model. Our ID map is fine. I'm just going to jump into Photoshop really quickly and have a look at that ID map in Photoshop. It sort of looks like an alpha map problem to me. But I'm going to check that. I'm just going to open up that material ID that we exported from Max. No, there is no alpha map, so that should be fine. I'm going to save it out as a JPEG just to make sure, because I know that there won't be an alpha here. We're not using the texture for anything. This is just for a material ID map, so being in JPEG formats, we're not losing any information because we're not using any color information. We're only using the colors to do the selection. Again, no alpha, so that's good. Let's jump back into substance again. I'm going to remove that ID map. Let's go new again. Let's add the JPEG we just saved out from Photoshop. Okay. And let's select that ID map. Again, let's just throw down a material. Again, we've still got this problem. That is very strange. What we're doing is we're telling Substance to choose the color on our material ID map here that is this orange color. And if we look at our material ID map here, the only part that is that orange color is the swirl there at the bottom. But what it's doing for some reason is it's choosing part of the swirl up here that's in the blue or the teal. And it should not be doing that. I'm trying to work out why it is doing that. back to max. Let's select our original ID map version here. Okay. I'm just going to make a copy of that. And again, I'm going to reset my X spawn and collapse my stack. And let's export this version. Yeah, let's export this version of the model. We'll call this one Iron Swirls R3. Okay. It's just a general warning here about the material, that's fine. That won't affect what we're doing. Back into substance. Back to new. Discard. Select. Version 3. Let's add our ID map. Now you see that it's working correctly. Again, I have a feeling the original problem was because the mesh we were exporting from the background there had a texture map assigned to it, and the texture map had an alpha map. And the alpha map was being used, which was messing up our material ID map here. So getting back to what we were doing before, we have our gold metal paint, which I want to put on the inlay there and on that base. So I'm going to select that. And you see what that's done is that's just added that gold paint just to that part of the model, but we're still only using one texture. We're not using multiple textures. Let's work on another part here. Let's work on the frame. Just going to remove this layer here at the top because we don't need that. So again, just to explain, the problem originally was because the model in the background that we were exporting here, the original texture had an alpha map. So by exporting the original model that we created the multi-material on, that fixed that problem up because it never had an alpha map to begin with. So let's work on this, we'll work on the frame. Let's see, rusty iron I think is what I used for that, so rusty iron. Now we'll drag that to the top of our stack. You see it's applied it to the entire model, but we only want it on our frame. And again, we do that by going add mask with color selection, pick color, and pick that frame color. So now we have two separate textures without doing any of the fiddly painting, but we're still only using one material. We're not going to have multiple materials, so we're only going to have one draw core. All right, let's work on these swirls here in the middle, and smooth oxidized iron is I think the one I used for that. So this one here. Again, I'm going to drag it to the top of my stack. That applies it to the entire model. Again, I'm going to add a mask with color, pick color, and pick our swirls in the middle. And now we have three different textures assigned. The swirls are one texture, the frame is another, and then the gold of this part of the model. Now the rusty iron border, I do want to up my UV on that a bit, I think. So I'm going to change that to maybe 6. And that just gives it a better overall look. And the oxidized iron here as well, I think I'll change my UV mapping on that to maybe 5. Okay, so all we have left now to do is to add the texture here for this square inset here at the base. And I think for that one we'll use rusted steel. Hey Sniper Echo. I am doing well, thank you. I hope you are as well. I hope you had a good weekend, or you guys had a good weekend. We're just working with a multi-material here in Substance Painter at the moment, finishing, we're doing that gate section. Well, I decided I wanted to retexture it. I don't like the original texture, so I'm retexturing it up in Substance Painter. And I already did the door section, which is this one here, and I brought that into Unreal. So now we're going to be working on the rest of that ironwork to match this door section. I just thought by putting a bit more interest in the actual model as opposed to it all being one color like it was originally in Max here, makes it look more interesting. So now we just have to add a separate material here for our square inset in the base. And like I said, by using a multi-material ID map that we rendered out in Max, we don't have to go in there and paint it by hand. It makes life much easier. And we were looking for rusted steel for the bottom. Where is rusted steel? Here we are. Again, I'm going to drag that to the top of my stack. Again, it's going to apply to the entire model. So again, I want to go add mask with color selection, pick the color and pick the bottom there. So now we have our rusted steel applied only to that inset plate there, not the rest of our model. And again, it just rendering out an ID map like this saves a lot of fiddling around inside of Substance Painter, particularly if you want to create a multi-material object like this. So having our material ID map here means we don't have to go in there and paint those sections up by hand. A lot quicker, a lot easier, a lot less fiddly. And again, having one texture means we're not using a multi-texture on one object, which means less draw calls, which is just better all round in our game engine. Now that we've textured this piece up, just before I export and take it into Unreal, I'm just going to take a quick break, guys. I just want to grab a fresh cup of coffee. This one is full, but it's cold. So I'll be back in just a couple of minutes. I'll leave you with my Be Right Back screen, and when we come back, we'll finish texturing up the rest of that ironwork for the inside of the building. So I'll be back in just a few minutes, guys. Okay. So just to recap, because I know it could get a bit confusing there, let's jump back into Max and explain again what happened with that original piece that we exported here in the background that we were using originally. The original texture used an alpha map, and that was causing problems when we were trying to select our ID map in Substance Painter. And the way I fixed that was just by exporting the copy we made, which had the material ID map assigned to it. So I'm just going to delete that that one there. Now we've rendered out a render to texture for that piece of geometry in Substance Painter, which is here. So now we're using 4 different materials. We use the material ID map to assign the materials to different parts of the model so that we didn't have to hand paint them. Made our life easier by not having to go in there and paint them using our brushes by hand. Let's export that. So let's go to our file and export texture. Make sure we save it into our folder here that we made specifically for that piece of geometry, which is UE4 projects, models, Art Deco building, exports, and iron swirls. I'll leave it called default material, that's fine. I'll rename it once I take it into Unreal. So let's just do an export here. Before we take it into Unreal, let's jump into our max and assign the texture to that object, just so we keep everything consistent here. We know what's going on. So I'm just going to create another standard texture with a bitmap. Jump into our Iron Swirls folder, select the texture that Substance just saved for us. Pipe it into our diffuse and make sure we turn on Show Shaded and Show Realistic. Select our model in the background and assign the texture. Again, we're having that problem. Again, you see our assigned texture is incorrect. That tells us the alpha map is incorrect. But we can fix that easily enough just by selecting our original multi-material here. I'm going to make a copy of it. Hold down the Shift key and drag. Assign a material, and you see now our material has been assigned correctly. I'm going to delete the one there in the background and just move our copy back. Alright. So again, here in the foreground we have our multi-material versions, and in the background here now we have our painted versions from Substance Painter. Let's bring that into the Unreal Engine. So we'll start by importing the model. Again, because we're not exporting from max at 000 wall space, make sure transform vertex to absolute is turned off or unticked. Okay, it's brought in our model, but it's untextured at the moment, so we have to create a material for it in Unreal. I think the easiest way to do that is going to be to duplicate one that I've already got for the Iron Gate. I'm going to call this one Iron Swirls. I just want to get rid of the 2 on the end of the material. Alright. Let's jump into our textures folder. Again, we're keeping everything separate so that we can find things easily. And let's import those textures we exported from Substance Painter. So this one, and this one. So we've got our color map, our normal map, and our occlusion, roughness and metallic map. It includes all 3 within one texture. Again, that's to save space and memory on in your game. Let's swap out the texture here for this texture map. Let's swap out the normal map. And let's swap out the roughness, occlusion and metallic. We'll just give Unreal a minute there to compile the material. Make sure we save it. Okay, let's jump back up to our model. Open that up. Jump back to our material. and drag that into over our model map slot there. And now we have our material imported into Unreal and textured up using just one material, again to save on draw calls. And we only need one of these, and we can instance it in the engine to create that gate section. Again, saving memory by just copying and creating an instance instead of exporting multiple versions of the same model. So let's make sure we save everything. So save all. Jump back into Max. Thanks, Sniper Echo. How's the motion capture stuff coming? You're talking about doing some mocap stuff. Have you started doing any of that yet, or are you still looking at starting it? I'm interested to hear about that sort of stuff as well. Like I said, I don't have a lot to do with animation, but it doesn't mean I'm not interested in finding out about it. So let's just select all of these pieces here and go into isolation mode. It just makes finding things a little easier here in Max. So again, we've got, we only exported one of these swirled sections. We're not going to be exporting the other three because we're going to instance that piece of geometry for these other three pieces inside of Unreal when we rebuild this iron gate section. The same thing here. We're not going to be exporting these two pieces because we already exported one here that we're using for the gates that go in the middle. And we can just reuse those for these two pieces on the side. Sniper Echo says the motion capture is going okay. He's getting this set up right at the moment. Make sure you get a good workflow going. That's important. It'll save time in the long run. I know sometimes when you're doing 3D stuff, it can be tempting to jump straight in and go hell for leather, but if you make sure your workflow is good to begin with, it'll save you a lot of time in the long run. So, smart, wise move. And it's an interesting thing to be doing some motion capture. Alright, so again, we don't have to worry about these two pieces here because we've already done them when we did the gate section in the middle. We only have to worry about one of these swirls because we're going to be instancing it for these other three. So the only other part left for this gate really is the top section. So again, this is one piece of geometry, so what we're going to have to do is go into sub-object mode and deselect the top of the gate. So that one. Now, what you could do here for a game model, again, these are because this is going into a game engine, I'm doing it this way. But if you're doing a rendering, you wouldn't have to worry about doing this sort of thing because you don't have to worry so much about memory and polygon count. What you could do for a game model here is split this down the middle, so you only export one half, and then just duplicate that half to the other side, so that would use half the amount of polys that you need. If you're say making a mobile game where it's really, really important that you have low polygon and you save as much memory as you possibly can, that'd be what you'd do for this piece of geometry. Now, because I'm going to be running this, creating a cinematic in Unreal that's going to be running on my desktop computer, I'm not going to worry about doing that. But again, if you're doing it for a mobile game, for this piece of geometry, my suggestion would be split it down the middle and duplicate the one side to the other. That'll reduce your poly count in half there. But like I said, I'm not doing it because I'm running it on a desktop, so I don't have that problem really. So I'm just going to select all the pieces of geometry that make up that top circular section of this gate. And again, I could do this in the front viewport and select everything at once, but I like to do it this way because that way I can make sure all my polys are actually welded correctly. I'll know if they're not because when I select an object like this, it won't select the entire object. I'm not going to select the circle, and I'll show you why once we've finished painting up this part of the geometry. I'm going to actually change the texture that's on that circle. I'm not going to do that in Substance, so I'm going to do that with a bitmap in Max in Photoshop and Null. Again, I don't like the texture I used back in 2011 there. I want to add something a bit more interesting there. You see when I selected this piece, we're having problems. That tells me that there's a problem with the vertices there on that piece of geometry. So I'm going to deselect that. Continue selecting the rest of them. I'm going to come back and look at that in just a minute. Again, this is why I like to do it this way. Select them gradually, because it'll tell me pretty quickly whether I've got a problem anywhere, as opposed to me jumping in the front viewport and doing a select all. So let me have a look. I need that piece at the bottom. Just going to pull out and check what we've got here. So we have the bottom pieces. I'm going to be copying that scroll for underneath either side of the gate here, so I don't have to select any of the bottom. I'm not selecting the circle because I'm going to be redoing that. And I'm not selecting this scroll because there's a problem obviously with the verts. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to detach. Select the piece that we just detached, and I'm going to go into isolation again. I'm going to jump into my front viewport. Go back into sub-object mode. Select that scroll. I'm going to again do a detach, but I'm going to detach as a clone, which means I'm going to keep my original scroll there. Select that scroll that we just detached. Try to anyway. There we go. Just to make it easy for me to move around, I'm going to center my pivot here to the object, move it over. I'm going to mirror the object and move it into place. That looks good. Alright, now let's just attach that scroll to the rest of the model now. Wrong button. Attach is what I want. There we go. So now we have our piece of geometry here. I selected it all individually so I know all the welds are good and everything is good to go. I replaced that scroll that was obviously had a problem in the old version. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a copy. So hold down the shift key and drag a copy out. Again, I'm going to start now by doing a reset X form. Collapse my stack. Center my pivot again to make sure. Again, I'm going to isolate my selection. Now I'm going to go into sub-object mode again, and now we have to decide what colors we want for what. So I think I'm going to make these bits of the model, to make sure you don't move it by mistake, gold. So I'll start by selecting every part that I think I want to be a gold metal. I'm not going to detach this time like we did last time. We'll leave it still attached. So I'm just going to look through my model here and choose parts that I want to be a gold metallic color. I might take these as well.